Mona Bitar is an entrepreneur and high-performance whole-person health coach and global educator with over 2 decades of experience representing international health and fitness brands. Mona works with her clients using a whole-person health approach that moves through the 4 pillars of health: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, to reconnect people back to themselves and their bodies to forge their own path in reclaiming health. Mona is also a master trainer with Breath Masters, world leaders in transformational breathwork certifications and education. Welcome, Mona, and thanks so much for being here. Your last name is pronounced Bitar, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
I didn't want to slaughter it because that's the worst. Someone's name is the most beautiful sound they can possibly hear.
Oh, I'm okay with it. It's all good. It's like I have this this dilemma living here in this part of the world because my name, Mona, is spelled with an O, and it's one of my biggest pet peeves because in Arabic, there's Mona, but in the Arab world, it's M-U-N-A, so it's Muna. So when people call my name in Arabic, it's that. So when they spell my name with a U, it does my head in. Because it's Mona. And my mom and dad actually had an argument over the spelling of my name when I was born.
Really?
My dad wanted it to be with a U, so it was more Arab. My mom was like, no, I want it as Mona. Because I was born in Mississippi.
I was going to ask you that because it's obvious that you are not from where you are now and you live in Qatar right now. Jordan. Okay. So interestingly enough, I mean, why don't you start by telling us how you got over there?
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting story. So Jordan has basically been, so my parents are originally both from Palestine, across the border, and with the political situation and stuff across, years ago they moved over to Jordan. So a lot of Palestinians actually migrated over to Jordan, and so my grandparents basically moved here. My dad's actually half-breed; he's half Italian, and so my family's lineage left Jerusalem years and years and years ago, moved to Jordan, and then we kind of left Jordan altogether. I mean, I didn't grow up here for a start. I was born, like I said, I was born in Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi, on an Air Force base, actually. So the way I ended up in Jordan was back in 1999, was it 1999? I think so. Well, my parents split up and we ended up moving here. And so I finished the last couple of years of high school in Jordan. And then I left. I went to Ohio for school, Toledo, Ohio. And then I came back to Jordan, and then we left Jordan, went over to the UAE. So I was living in Dubai for quite a while. And, as the adventure of life takes you all over the place, I left Dubai. I moved over to Beirut. So I lived in Lebanon for some time. I lived in Qatar for some time. And I did some traveling across the Middle East region, teaching fitness certification courses and educational certification courses and stuff like that. And then I met who's now my ex-partner in Jordan when I was kind of in a transitional phase. And so I left Jordan with potentially this job that I signed up for in India. And I injured my back really badly in that transition phase. So I was off my legs for an entire year, unable to walk. And so obviously with my recovery took about a year. And so during that time, obviously my contract in India fell through. I ended up getting stuck in Dubai, recovering. I was on my mom's floor for a few months because I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand up, I couldn't do anything. And so when I started to move again and I started to be able to walk and train and do all of these things, I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? And so I ended up moving myself to Jordan. And that's kind of where my relationship took off. And so that's ultimately why I moved to Jordan. about 12 years ago. And now I'm
Wow.
ready. And now I'm ready for an exit.
Uh, and the next chapter begins. So that moment when you were unable to walk and move, uh, do you mind talking about that for a second? Because I think that's something that people, when someone has a surgery or an injury, or they have a moment in life where they're just, I mean, I know the reason that you and I, Mona, we speak the same language. We're movers. We love to move, and having movement taken away is a hard thing. I've been there for a while too, but can you talk about how you got through that part?
Oh, of course. So funny thing is, like, as you know, as all things in life, when I injured my spine, I basically, most people think I injured my spine in training, working out, but that's not the case, actually. Bizarre, isn't it? So, because I train to, you know, to get stronger, to live longer, to be able to move for as long as I possibly can. But actually, when I injured my back, it was we had the year that I injured my back, we had really heavy snow in Jordan, and the city, well, the country was shut down for about 5 days because we were snowed in. And I was walking out of my apartment, and outside of my apartment, inside of my building, the flooring, the tiles were marbled, so they were really slick. So I couldn't see the ice on them. And so I slid and I took an entire flight of stairs on my spine from top to bottom. And so that left me with like 5 disc herniations, 2 disc bulges, a couple of them pressing on some nerves, which is why I couldn't really, I mean, I could feel my legs, but it's like every time I came to stand up, my knees would buckle and I'd drop to the ground. And so I went from doctor to doctor trying to find basically a solution. You know, as it is with Western medicine, it's like the quickest solution is let's cut your spine open and fix it. I'm like, no.
No.
So so I hobbled from one practitioner to the next, looking for somebody, for at least one person that could offer me an alternative option, and then I could make a decision. So, you know, so I saw some surgeons were like, we'll surgically cut your spine open. I'm like, no, nobody's cutting my spine open. And then some doctors, I literally went to about 7 doctors, and a few of them wanted to go in and kind of, you know, clean up my discs and stuff, like the disc bulges and stuff with laser. And like, nobody's going into my spine. Can somebody please give me an alternative? And so I ended up finding this one doctor who's really, really old school in his techniques, but, you know, amazing bedside manners, really takes the time to explain things. He's actually a spinal neurosurgeon. And so I said, Doc, look, I've been to all these doctors. Everybody keeps giving me surgery as options. I refuse to let anybody touch my spine. You know, you break a vase, it's never going to, you glue it back together, it's not going to go back the same way. And the recovery time is pretty much going to be the same, whether I go, you know, the old school way of like a tradition, and I'll talk about that in a second, traditional, like old school mechanisms of healing, or I go down a fast route of surgery and then have to recover after the surgery, right? So the time is going to be pretty much the same. So he was like, yeah, sure, I will admit you into my hospital for a week to 10 days. I said, okay, what's the procedure? And he said, I will basically put you on a traction device. And so I'm like, okay, I like the sound of this. I like where this is going. So he takes me into this room and he shows me this traction device, and it literally looked like it was like a sadistic
Medieval.
contraption. I'm like, okay, what did I sign up for? And so he's like, so basically we'll put you in this bed, we'll attach these straps to your pelvis, we'll elevate your legs, and we'll have weights hanging off the end of the bed. And we'll do this in 3-hour intervals for about a week and see where you're at in a week. And every day we'll just increase the weights. And it was just basically day after day, they would increase the weights. And for 9 hours a day, I was connected to this traction device. And by day number 5, I was able to stand on my feet and start shuffling my feet across the ground, because it basically decompressed my spine and released the nerves that were trapped. And so that was kind of my way back. So in that process, the thing that I want to highlight here is that as I went from doctor to doctor, I caught myself getting into the stories of why me and like poor me and like, you know, the victim mentality, and I'm never going to be able to train again, because that's what doctors said to me.
Of
They
course, they
said, you
always
know,
say that.
yeah, you will never train again. And, you know, you should start, you know, you should start looking for a new career. And I said, hang on. And so there's one doctor, I said to him, I said, with all due respect, and you know, I have mean no offense to anybody here, but I said, Doc, have you taken a look at yourself in the mirror lately? And he had this ashtray on his desk, right? Clearly he was a smoker. And, you know, and I said, you don't get to tell me when I can see that your health isn't optimal. You don't get to tell me what I shouldn't do, what I can and can't do. Your job is to give me solutions for the problem that I have, that I've come to you with, and then I will deal with the rest later. I'm the person that lives inside of my body. Right? And so when I found this doctor who put me on the traction device, that was awesome, because in that entire process, and mind you, this was like about 13 years ago, right? So 13 years ago, like I was still in my like late 20s, and I'm like, my career's over. Why me? Poor me. My life is over. And I kind of started to spiral down that rabbit hole. And then there was this moment where I'm like, I got to take charge here. Like, I need to get into the driver's seat of what's happening with me, because I get to call the shots. This is my body. This is my life. And I've got one or two choices. I can succumb to the fact that all these doctors are saying, you'll never lift weights again. You'll never train again. You'll be able to walk and swim. Or I can step into my power and own it and own my stories and decide that I was going to heal.
Yes. I love I freaking love you, Mona, for all that you are, and I love you even more for that, because that is so true. And use that, everybody that's listening. You will be told by doctors. I've been there. I've guided other people out of it when doctors tell them you'll never do this again. You'll never do that again. And it's a story. I don't even know why they tell that kind of story, because always one should seek hope, and always one should seek solutions rather than focusing on the problem.
Well, the thing is, right, it's like, you know, it's like with like when we talk about health, right, most people will gravitate towards the healthcare system that we know, which is the medical care system, which is actually sick care, not healthcare, right? People go to the medical system because they're already sick. The healthcare system is what we do. We're in the healthcare business, where we're preventative, you know, where we're teaching people tools and skills, life skills and life hacks and teaching tools and skills that will help people actually take their own health into their own hands. You know what I mean? And so, but the thing about Western medicine, and it's got its place. Like if I broke a limb tomorrow, I need a doctor to freaking put my limbs back together, right? So it's needed. There's a place for everything. But the thing that in the known, or the generically known healthcare system, the Western medicine system, is even doctors like are not really educated on things like nutrition. There's no like personal development on things like mindset, our inner stories and inner language. And so the bedside manner is literally like you go to a doctor and it's like, where does it hurt? This is the solution, right? It's everything external. But the truth is, there's our external reality that we live in, and then there's our internal world, and that's our pharmacy, our healthcare system is internal. It's inside of us. Like each one of us has everything that we need innately built into our system and into our bodies. All we got to do is turn inwards and listen to listen to that voice from the inside that's saying, I got you, or trying to put us down. And only when we tune into those voices are we able to actually take control and determine or separate fact from fiction, truth from what is imagined. Because we have our imagined reality, and then we have what's actually accurate, the things that actually exist. There's us, and then there's all the other voices of us. You know, it's like, which voice is the voice of truth? And it's the one that really resonates and vibrates. And it's not the one that's loudest. It's usually the one that's quiet, you know, and you know, we think about this, right? It's like, how often do we refer to my gut feeling tells me this, my instincts, right? We refer to our gut more than anything. There's no wonder our immune system lives in our gut. 80% of our immune system lives in our gut. All of our answers are inside of our body.
Yeah. And also to be careful to be confused by so many messages coming from the media and social media, and you should do this and you should do that. And oh, if you're not like this, then something's wrong with you and you need this pill and you need that tool. And yeah, and it's such a good point that you make, Mona, to really take time to go inwards and listen, because we know what we always really know. Like there's been situations I'm sure that everybody that's listening has been in, and they're like, damn, I sort of knew that from the beginning. And you go down this long journey of like trying to find somebody to confirm what you already knew deep inside.
Totally, totally, right? And it's like, you know, it's like I talk about this and I teach this a lot, like take the virtue of honesty. And I was just talking about this yesterday and the day before and the day before. Like when we think of the virtue of honesty, we normally think of honesty as us being honest with somebody else. But how often are we actually honest with ourselves? You know, I know a lot of people that even in the privacy of being on their own, where nobody is watching, where they're on their own with the privacy of their innermost deep thoughts and their journaling, even in people's private journaling practices, they are backspace, delete, edit. We write our journals as if we're writing them for somebody else to read. So even when we're with our own thoughts, we are editing, cutting out, deleting things and censoring things. But it's only when we actually turn into the voice of our inner truth and we actually allow ourselves to be radically honest with ourselves, to allow those thoughts and feelings that are running through us to actually come out and write them out on paper exactly as they are with no editing. That's when we get to know who we are.
And, you know, I think that people find that terrifying for some reason. I know that, I mean, I've been on a sobriety journey for about 11 years, and part of becoming sober is meeting yourself honestly where you're at and who you really are, and embracing the dark side as well as the bright side. And I think people, would you agree that people are sort of afraid to get honest because they're afraid of going inward, which is the safest place to go, but it seems like people resist that so much.
100%, right? Where most of, like a lot of people are driven by fear, making decisions based off of fear, the worst case scenarios. Like when you're faced with a decision to make, first thing we play out is, what's the worst case scenario? But that's 50%, that's a 50% probability, right? But what if it turned out to be the best case scenario? What if, right? And so, yeah, I mean, when being honest with ourselves, most people, we're just trying to push things down. We're trying to, and the thing is, like, our limbic brain is wired to protect us, right? Our ego is wired to protect us. Our ego is not a bad thing. It's got a function. It's got a voice for a reason. You know, there are some things where we need to go, okay, yeah, maybe I should be fearful of this. Maybe this is going to risk my life. You know what I mean? But in large scale, it's like even the day-to-day stuff, we are, you know, we're so trapped in questioning and self-doubt and doubting and the conspiracy theories and all of that. And that's what our ego is designed to do. Our brain is designed and wired to keep us safe. And so any experience that we are faced with in the present moment, if we've had something that's remotely similar to it in the past, our brain is going to go, oh, we've been here before. This is unsafe. Time to react. And we automatically go into that fight or flight. And so number one, we're never really in the present moment. We're either living in the past or we're worried about the future. And so that's where anxiety is, right? It's anxiety is living in the past and fear is living in the future.
Mm. Yeah, right here, right now. It's, yeah, I do it too. Even though I coach people to stay in the moment, I do it too. Like you said, Mona, it's part of human nature. It's the way that our ancient prehistoric brain has developed our nervous system over hundreds of millions of years, that you can't help it but fall into that. But it's just good to have an awareness to always bring yourself back to the present moment, which transitions us to the breath. So I want to just touch briefly upon one reason that I just gravitate so much towards Mona is I know that, Mona, you have a history in the fitness industry. So if you want to briefly touch on that, and how did you transition? And I know you're still teaching fitness, but how did you ultimately find breath work and begin to implement that into the way that you help people?
I love that question, Rachel. Thank you. So, I got into the health and fitness industry about 23 years ago, and basically the industry kind of fell in my lap in a sense. So it found me as opposed to I found it. It was a passion of mine. Well, fitness for me as a kid, or sports in general as a kid, started off for me in school. I had a pretty rough childhood, coming from a dysfunctional family home, and so in school and I didn't have any friends because as I was growing up, I was also battling with my sexual identity and like a whole host of things. And and living in this part of the world, which adds just that extra layer of challenges to it. And so there were so many layers to me wanting to avoid obviously feeling pain. And so because there was so much going on in my life at the time, I didn't really have friends in school. And so I gravitated towards, and because I was the awkward kid, the different kid, because I was, like I said, I was battling with my own sexual identity. And so I dressed differently, I looked differently, and I showed up differently. And I was in a private school, and the truth is kids can be harsh sometimes. And so what I did was in school, I started to join as many sports teams as I could so that I would avoid being around other students on recess times or after school. After school, I would do, after school sport activities so that I wouldn't have to go home to the fire of, the dysfunctionality of household. And so I would sign up to as many sports teams as I could just to keep myself away from people, away from home for as long as possible. And so that's kind of where sport started for me. And then, I went off to school, got back, came back to Jordan. And so when I was in school and university in Ohio, I actually didn't graduate. So I was doing a double major in sports medicine and athletic training, but I couldn't pay for it anymore. And I was working 3 jobs, and I was in a deep, dark place of depression. And I was pretty ready to take my own life at that time. And I didn't want to be a failure in front of my family. And so that was kind of one of the biggest turning points in my life, where I rang my mom up from university and I said, and my relationship with her was really rocky because I had just come out to her right before I went off to university. So our relationship was really rough. And but then I rang her up and I said, Mom, I am depressed. I'm basically skin and bone at this point. And I need you to be my mom right now. I need you to tell me it's okay to fail. I need you to tell me that it's okay to drop out and come back. And she said, pack your bags and come home. I needed somebody to make it okay for me, because I was so harsh on myself because I've been a soldier my whole life, you know? And so I packed my bags and I literally just disappeared. Didn't even transfer any credits, never went to university to officially drop out, or I just disappeared. And I flew back to Jordan, and so what was a passion and a need of mine, so sport and fitness and movement, ended up becoming my career. So I came back to Jordan and I joined a local gym here, and I started going in and participating in spin classes and just kind of weight training in the gym and stuff like that. And I love music. Like, music for me is like my religion. And, we speak the same language on so many levels, Rachel. And so, back in the day, back in the early 2000s, we had, the like Nero CD burning apps. Not apps even, they were software and stuff like that. And so what I would do is I would burn all of these CDs. I would mix music for the spin instructor that I used to go to classes with. And I just give her, just make music for her. And then one day she was like, "You're really good at this. Like, and, would you be interested in like starting off by just covering some classes for me when I need you to?" And I said, yes, and so I started to just kind of fill in for classes, and I did my first personal training certification. And that's kind of where my career in fitness took off. So I was about 18 years old when I started, 17, 18 years old. And so that's kind of where I started off in the fitness industry, long story short. And then in a few years later, with all of the, with all of the stress and all of the emotional turmoil, the dysfunctionality, and, my experiences with things like sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and things like that, eventually in 2000, that caught up with me on a physical level. So I actually got physically sick. So in 2005, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And then in 2005, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And then in 2006, I was diagnosed with Epstein Barr virus. So 2 autoimmune diseases.
You want to hear something crazy?
Yeah.
Something. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2012.
Wow.
We have so many parallels. It just is so insane. But anyways, continue.
So I was diagnosed with those 2 autoimmune diseases, and I was heavily medicated, as you do. So I was on like a shit ton of medication. I was on corticosteroids to control the inflammation. So there was days where I literally could not get out of bed. And here I was, an advocate for health and fitness, right? And so I took it upon myself to take control of my own health. And that was kind of the starting point of my journey into studying and learning about nutrition, gut health, hormones. And I just went down that, deep dive of studies, basically to take care of myself. So I made myself my own guinea pig for 2 years from that point in time. And so for 2 years, I took it upon myself to basically keep a journal of every single day I woke up, how I was feeling when I woke up, and then how I was feeling before I ate, and then how I felt, what I ate, and how I felt after I ate certain foods, and then 2 hours later, how I was feeling. And so for 2 years, it was this experimentation with just eliminating things and doing more things that made me feel good. And I started my journey with, therapy and energy healing. So I was seeing a whole team of people, not just a therapist, right? And so that's kind of where I started understanding that there was more to healing than medicine, and so that was where my spiritual healing, my energetic healing started with my spiritual mentor who passed away last year. And so I was seeing a whole team of people, from a pranic healer to a kinesiologist to, there's another breathwork, there's another practitioner at the center. And then my therapist and mentor who passed away, she was also a hypnotherapist. and a spiritual mentor and healer. And so that started off my journey down that path. Plus, I started to educate myself, started to take on courses to educate myself on things like gut health and the immune system and things like that. And I basically went cold turkey with my medication. I just dumped all my meds in the bin one day. I woke up one day and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I was about 24, maybe 25. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like, there were days where I literally could not stand on my feet because my joints just physically hurt and I couldn't show up for my clients. And so I was like, fuck this. I threw all my meds in the bin. And it was that journey of 2 years of just experimenting with myself until I found, like, I eliminated everything food-wise. I eliminated everything that made me feel like crap, right? And then I started to introduce more things that made me feel good. And so this was from about, I'd say, 2007 to about 2009 was that journey. And then in 2010, I got really, really sick again. And I thought it was a flare-up of Crohn's. So I had everything, every symptom under the sun that says this is a flare-up. You know, I had the diarrhea, the vomiting, the fever, the joint aches. I was losing weight like insanely. And this is the thing, people would say, oh my God, you look so good, you're losing weight, right? And I want to highlight that because it's so important, because when we pay people compliments like that, they're not always a compliment, right? We never know what's going on with somebody. And this is just a great platform to be able to highlight all of these things. Thank you, Rachel. And so I was losing weight and I got really sick and I was hospitalized again. But here's the thing about that hospitalization. So I had every single symptom you could imagine. Like, it was it was even bigger than my first flare-up, which led me to the diagnosis, right? So I went into the colonoscopy. I had that colonoscopy that year. I was in hospital for 2 weeks on IV fluids because I couldn't keep anything down and stuff like that. And I had given the gastroenterologist all of my results from my initial diagnosis, the video from my initial colonoscopy, where my initial diagnosis was like 90% of my large intestine was inflamed, ruptured, and ulcerated. And the doctors back then said, if you don't take these medications, if you don't take the corticosteroids, we're going to have to start cutting pieces out of your colon. And I'm in my 20s, like, I don't want a bag hanging out the side of my body. Not that anybody wants that, regardless of how young or old we are, but just that image, that thought was like, I would rather, I would rather not be on this planet, And anyway, so I gave him the diagnosis, I gave him the video, I went into the colonoscopy, I came out. And so in that time frame, I had already started my healing journey on different levels, like the breath work, the energy healing, the therapy, the hypnotherapy, and all of that stuff. So the doctor comes to see me and he goes, Mona, are you sure you gave me your results in your video? I said, they've got my name on them.
I don't have any extra ones laying around.
I'm like, why, doc? What's the damage? And he goes, your colon is clean. There's nothing in there that I could see. So it's almost like that sickness was kind of like my body purging. That's the only explanation that I can give to it, was my body just had this massive purge from all of the healing that I had been doing for the couple of years that I'd started in. And I was just purging all of this stuff. And that's why I got so sick, because medically, there was nothing in my results that was saying there was anything, quote unquote, wrong with me. Even Crohn's was non-detectable. My colon was clean, the inflammation was gone. And he was like, whatever you're doing, just keep on doing it.
Interesting. I've been reading just endless amounts of books about some of the subject matter that we've learned in the Breath Masters Academy. And Crohn's keeps coming up in being linked to past trauma and et cetera. And so it's really got me thinking, especially in listening to you talking about kind of a rocky, upstart in your youth, that there's just so much possibility that a lot of the things that we're diagnosed with by Western medicine has a bigger, there's a larger answer, like you have found with all these different modalities of energy healing and everything. And I know you know what I mean. It's something to consider for anybody listening, that there's always a greater answer to what's going on inside the body, and you just have to tune in and seek answers. And you don't always have to take the word of the doctor, because there's a lot of parallels again of what you're saying, Mona, about the journey with Crohn's. My very first doctor that diagnosed me, I remember coming in and I started doing exactly what you were talking about. I was looking at different things about what I'm eating, how it's affecting what's going on. And he's like, "Oh, it's baloney. There's nothing. It just has nothing to do with what you eat." And I'm like, "It's a gastrointestinal condition. Like, of course, what I eat is going to have an effect." So I got me a new doctor who is totally on, he's cool and totally on board with my different ways that I keep myself healthy. I do keep a doctor in terms of my condition at this point. And there's always different methods. There's these ancient methods. There's these energy type of methods that can give you different types of results, as you're saying, Mona. So please continue.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so that continued my journey there. And so he's like, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing." He said, "What medications are you on right now?" I said, "Nothing." And his jaw literally just dropped, because I have been medication free. I've been living medication free since 2007. And, and I am healthier, stronger, fitter and I'm now in my 40s, and I'm fitter, stronger, and healthier than I've ever been, And so breathwork came in. So so my first exposure to breath work, to like down regulation breath work, was in one of my nutrition courses. And part of the course was Dr. Andrew Weil, who is the 4-7-8 guy that created the 4-7-8 breath, the 4 inhale, 7-second pause, 8-second exhale. So that was my first exposure to breath. This was around, I think it was around 2008, maybe. Yeah. So that was kind of my first exposure to breath, in parallel with all the work that I was doing with God rest her soul, Suzanne, and all of her team, where they would go, "All right, breathe deeply," especially when I was going through hypnosis and things like that. There's a lot of breath incorporated. And I was like, it's actually, because I was a very angry teenager. I had a lot of anger and rage that I had to work through. And so the first thing that would happen when I would go into a session where I'd be fluctuating at this frequency, where I was like, my entire body was literally shaking and tremoring from anger and rage, was the first thing I would do is see the pranic healer, down regulate, bring my nervous system down, so that I could actually sit with Suzanne and start, going into hypnotherapy, and then talking and being able to actually say things that made sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And be able to see a larger picture than the image of like just the anger and like the reactivity and stuff like that. So that was kind of my first exposures to breath work. And so I started to just use breath work for myself around meals. So if I found myself, in the fitness industry, we're not always necessarily the healthiest with our habits, right? We're always running around, especially in the early days where you're just trying to build your database of clients. You're trying to attract more clients. You're thinking dollar per hour. The more clients I attract, the more money I'm going to make. And I was working as a freelancer, and so it was like, so you end up forgetting about yourself in that process, right? And grabbing things on the go, protein bars here, protein shakes on the go, and stuff like that. And not really genuinely taking care of yourself. Like, even when it comes to training yourself, it's like you're so exhausted that all your body wants to do is sleep. But instead, you're in the gym pushing yourself because you got to walk the talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to incorporate, breath work into my day when I'd find myself stuck in traffic, or having a stressful day, or right around my meals, like when I'd actually sit down to a meal and just be like, all right, take a beat, take a few breaths. And then fast forward to a few years ago, I was on a personal development and leadership program, and there's a lot of breath work into that, along with story work. And then I dove into a language training course in NLP. So I'm a level 3 certified language practitioner. So it's language in terms of like our inner narratives, our inner story. So story work and breath combined. And then I got into a little bit of Wim Hof breathing, and then COVID hit, and breath work just exploded, right? With everybody starting to talk about the immune system, and everybody started to talk about, mental health, and not that it wasn't around before, but it was like the highlight. And so I actually jumped on a breath work practitioner facilitator course, which was mainly performance breathing. So it was like apnea training, performance breathing for high-level athletes, performance athletes on game day, post-game day, and things like that. And so, because some of the clients that I was working with were MMA, cage fighters, and stuff like high-level, like UFC and MMA fighters and stuff like that. And so I use breath work with them to get them ready, to get them focused for training, to down-regulate them after, to regulate the nervous system inside of training, and then at fights as well. So when when I got to be corner man with their coaches and stuff like that. So that was my first official training in breath work. It was more on the performance side of things. So a lot of physiology of breathing, the nervous system, and the polyvagal theory and all that stuff. And then my stumble into Breath Masters was, so like my life has kind of been, as life is, a roller coaster, stop and go, stop and go, stop and go, right? So just over a year ago, Suzanne, my spiritual mentor, passed away. And I went into a deep, deep, deep depression. I basically could not see a reason to live anymore. And I started to slip into habits, behaviors that I didn't want to be in, that I had worked so hard to get away from, And so I was in a really dark place. And then I had this, and I kept seeing the advertisement for Breath Masters pop up. And at first I was really skeptical, and I'm like, yeah, no, because I was in a very different space. Like I was grieving heavily. I was not in a good place. Things weren't great in my relationship, and just everything, and business was a bit of a struggle for, like my business was struggling a little bit. And this was like, I was still in the process of actually closing down my business, which was the brick and mortar gym that I owned here in Jordan. So there's a lot of money, just, there's a lot of financial losses. And so I was just not in a good place. And I was just like, I really don't want to, it's not like I wanted to kill myself, but I just did not want to be here. I don't want to be on this earth anymore. Like if something had happened, it'd just be like, it just came from some divine intervention. And so I was not in a good place. And then I had this moment where, you have these like moments of epiphanies, downloads, call them what you like. But I just knew that Suzanne was present. She was so omnipresent on a day, and she guided me to actually going, this breath, like, first of all, cleaning up my shit and getting my act together, and just being like, all right, this is it. I'm at my point of enough. Like there is no deeper I can go down this hole. Like the next thing to do is to take my own life. That's the next step. And so I was at that crossroad. And so I chose to take control and clean up my life. And so I jumped online. I actually searched for the Breath Masters ad, clicked on, got on my sales call with, it was Philip, the guy that I spoke to, and he shared with me the letting go 9D journey. And I did that journey. And the experience that I had in that, because up until that point, Suzanne had passed away. I was so alone. Everything in my life was just dark, right? And I would close my eyes and I would hope that I could see Suzanne's face. I call upon her and, I'm looking for clarity. I'm asking for some divine interference I'm asking for guidance, and I just could not see her anymore. And so I got into that journey with an open mind, open heart, and I dove into that journey. And it was the most powerful experience for me on a physical, mental, emotional level, where for an onlooker, it literally looked like I was undergoing an exorcism. Like my body was in tremors, it was in convulsions. My body was contorting and doing all this weird shit. And I was just, and up until that moment, I had not been able to cry for about 10 years. Like my grandma passed away in 2017, my aunt passed away in 2020, and I could not shed a single tear. And the floodgates came opening and my body just purged. And it was like I had so many visions inside of that journey. And then it's like it's kind of like being on a plant medicine journey. Like I saw all these colors and I saw all of this stuff. And then I started to see, like, towards the end of that breathwork journey, it was like I was going through this tunnel of like colors, and it was like this orange, like dark orange, lighter, and then it turned to yellow, and then it turned brighter and brighter. And then there was this bright white light that came at my face. And then the next thing I saw was Suzanne's face right up, her nose touching my nose. And I finally saw her. And I got the message that this was what I was meant to do. And I joined Breath Masters. And so that was my journey into Breath Masters.
Boom. It's so awesome. And you described it really well, because I find that the transformational breathwork journeys are sometimes the experience is impossible to describe because it's so powerful and just there's so much going on. That was a good explanation, and it can be a very powerful experience for some people, and obviously it was for you. And thank God it was, because Mona is one of the leaders in Breath Masters, one of the senior coaches, and absolutely just so knowledgeable in all the aspects of the work, and just such a wonderful guide. And so now tell me about the journey of becoming one of the senior coaches and what that looked like, the training, because I've been through the training and I know how powerful the training is from Brian and AJ and the team at Breath Masters. But tell me about your journey through that and where you are now. And also I know where you've mentioned where you're headed with it.
So my journey, my awakening, my reawakening last year and getting into Breath Masters, I cleaned my life up. I got into it with this clear vision and path of where I was going. And I started with the 10-week program, and in week number 3, which is the script writing week, and I'm not a professional writer, but I consider myself a writer because I write a lot. And I will give myself credit for my writing because it's something that I'm very proud of. My expression in life is through my writing. Like, I can't draw to save my life. I can't color inside the lines to save my life, but I paint with my words. And
You certainly do.
And that's a gift that I've had since I was, although funny story, it's to sidestep for a second. When I was in school and we had to write essays in school, I would always fail my essays because we would be given a subject to write on, and my brain would just go down this like space, and I would just create and write, and I would go over the word limit. But it's been a gift that I've had. And the question is, did I really fail? No, but I failed according to the system, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. But anyway, you truly are a gifted writer. I read, and I'm sure Mona will tell us how you can find her later at the end of this podcast, but following Mona and reading the words that she composes it's quite a special experience.
Thank you, Rachel. So week number 3, I saw this vision of what I could actually do with Breath Masters and what I could offer Breath Masters in terms of like collaborating. And, I saw a vision, and I reached out to Brian in week number 3. And I basically said to Brian in a message, I actually sent him, I friended him on Facebook. He didn't see my friend request because I was trying to tag him on something. So I sent him a private message, and I said, hey, Brian, this is Mona. I'm in this current cohort. I'm trying to friend you. Please accept my friendship because I'm trying to tag you on something. And so then in week number 3, I sent him a private message on Facebook Messenger, and I said, Brian, I know these are early days. I don't know what it looks like, but I want to be a part of the Breath Masters team. I don't know what it looks like just yet. I know that it's early days, but it is going to happen. And I'm going to come to you with proposition on some level. I said, we can talk again at the end of the cohort. And boom, he responded, and he goes, just enjoy the journey. And, let's see where the journey takes you, and let's chat. So at the end of the cohort, I got in touch with him again, and I said, I finished my certification because I was adamant to go through the 10 weeks and be done with my certification requirements by the end of the 10 weeks. And so I got in touch with him again, and I said, I have finished my certification, and I have created my very first journey from scratch. And it's my journey of reconnecting with the inner child. And that was the very first journey I created and crafted. And it was a tribute to Suzanne for all of the work that she'd done with me over the years. And I guided that journey a few times. And I said, and so Brian and I spoke, and I said, I would really like for you to experience this journey and stuff like that. And so I got to guide my journey inside of Breath Masters, inside of the platform. I guided it already about 4 times to my local community and clients and stuff like that. And it was so fucking powerful. And so I guided it inside of Breath Masters, and then I had already kind of put together this proposition of where I saw the vision of Breath Masters and me collaborating with Breath Masters could go. And so I asked for a meeting, and I basically presented this proposition, and they couldn't say no to me. And so I joined the team as their master trainer. And so now I'm working alongside Brian and AJ and Gary and Joe and the team in developing an educational curriculum that's going to stair-step students through basically going through a step-by-step process of going through being students on the 10-week program, but then ultimately if teaching Breath Masters Breathwork certification courses is where they want to go, then that's the curriculum that I'm co-creating with and for Breath Masters now. So that's how my role came about. And this comes from a lot of my background in the fitness industry of having worked for a global fitness company as a master trainer, teaching certification courses, training trainers, and basically co-managing a team of trainers, planning schedules and calendars across the globe and stuff like that. So I'm like, this is my background, this is what I've done, and this is what I can do and this is what I see where we can go with Breath Masters on the education side of things. And it was like, I'm just going to take the risk. And what's the worst that can happen? They're going to say no, and they're going to turn me down, right? That's the worst that's going to happen. But Mona from 5 years ago would have, or 7 years ago, would have never had the guts to be like, I'm going to be a part of your team. Basically, you're not going to be able to refuse me.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think that finding that, really listening to the inner self and finding that true voice that you were talking about at the very beginning of this podcast, we all know our strengths deep down, and sometimes we deny what our strengths really are, or we don't want to believe what our strengths are. We're told that they're not our strengths. Like a teacher telling you that you're not a good writer is just hilarious to me. That said, I'm pretty sure Einstein's teachers told his mother that he was not worth a damn. So there's that. It's just knowing what you really, that thing that you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, I just love this and I can't wait. And the money part is not even a significant reason why you're chasing what you're chasing, because you just know there's such a higher purpose. And that discovery sounds like happened to you through your self-exploration with breathwork, which is one of the reasons that these modalities are so powerful. I mean, I think you also were ready to be tuned in from all the other energy work and healing that you did with Suzanne and your other healers. It's just when you have that powerful vision, it's just undeniable. And you're like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to go after. And this is how I'm going to do it. Right. But it's also, being aware and always keeping a curious mind and, and enjoying the journey and the process. And, this is something that I always talk about with all the people that I get to work with. It's like people get so fixated on the outcome that they forget that the results are actually in the journey itself. It's not about the endpoint. It's not about the destination. It's about actually, it's great to have an objective and an outcome because that's what drives us forward. But actually enjoying the process as you go through it and learning along the way and taking stock, stopping, pausing, asking yourself, what did I actually learn? Because I'll tell you one thing, from the moment that Suzanne passed away until this very moment, this past year has basically, when you have awareness, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. It's like a gift and a curse, right? And so this past year, I have been so conscious and aware that ever since Susanna passed away, it's like the universe has been testing a lot of this lessons that I was learning to make sure that they've stuck. And so for the past year, it's basically been the universe, as if the universe has been holding this M16 and firing at me going, let's see what lessons. And so I've had a roller coaster of a year, you know what I mean? And my life in the past year has practically turned around 180 degrees.
That's amazing. And I hope that anyone out there listening can latch on to that knowledge that some of the things that Mona has shared today have included being in a really, really dark, hard, hopeless feeling place. And that there is a chance to turn everything around, no matter where you are right now listening to this and where you're sitting and how hard it feels. There's a lesson there. So seek the lesson and seek the evolution that's coming through that lesson. Beautiful. Because it could be absolutely transformative. Thank you so much, Mona, for giving me your time. I just appreciate you more than you know. And I am so grateful every time that I hear you speak, every time I hear you lead, every time that I get on a coaching call and you share these amazing bits of wisdom that you've picked up along the way. And so how can our listeners find you and reach out to you if they want to work with you or learn more or follow you?
Well, I mean, the quickest place is obviously everybody's on Instagram, right? So my Instagram handle is at wholehealth_with_Mona, that's Mona, and the letter B for Bitar, my surname. So wholehealth_with_Mona B. Alternately, they can find me on Facebook just with my name, Mona Bitar. And then if somebody wants to email me, it's monab@liftyourwholehealth.com.
Awesome. Be sure to go over and follow Mona on Instagram or Facebook, wherever you hang out the most, because again, I will reiterate that Mona's writing is magical and full of heartfelt, genuine, vulnerable wisdom and emotion that will touch your soul. So thank you again, Mona, for being everything that you are to me and to the people that you